few years ago, I started building multiple income streams in my creative business. Some of them are still making me money today without me touching them, whereas others completely died. And the difference between what lasted and what didn't has taught me everything I know about building a sustainable income. And that's exactly what I want to share with you today. So over the years, I've built income streams that have made thousands of pounds in sales in a matter of weeks, and others that have quietly ticked away in the background for years without me having to do much. And then there are the ones that I made a conscious decision to walk away from even though they were making me money, because what they were costing me in time and energy just wasn't worth it anymore. And today I want to walk you through what I'm focusing on now, like the things that are actually building my income in a way that works around my life and not against it. It's very easy to talk about passive income and evergreen systems like they're this magical, effortless thing that you set up once and then you disappear off to a beach somewhere. But the reality is a bit more nuanced than that. And unless you understand exactly how to build it, then passive income just doesn't work the way those YouTube videos would have you believe. So I'm going to walk you through an actual framework for deciding what's actually worth building, what to walk away from, and what the income streams that are still working for me years later all have in common. Because you're watching this, I'd guess that somewhere in the back of your mind, you're trying to figure out how to build something that doesn't require you to be switched on and showing up every single day just to keep the income moving. Maybe you're exhausted from constantly creating new things or showing up and chasing the next launch or the next post or the next sale, and you keep hearing people talk about passive income and systems and evergreen content, but you're not entirely sure what actually works. And I completely get it, because I spent a really long time in that exact place, trying things, investing time and energy and sometimes money into things that looked brilliant on paper but didn't quite deliver what I'd hoped. And for some of those things, I genuinely thought they were going to be the thing that finally gave me breathing room. But what I've learned is that income streams still working years later all have the same thing in common. And the ones that died also had the same thing in common. And once you can see that pattern clearly, it changes how you think about where you put your energy, which is especially important if your time is limited, which for most of us who are building around real life, it is. What declined? I want to start with the mistake, because I think understanding what went wrong is actually the most useful place to begin when it comes to building income that genuinely lasts. So my art channel, Fizz and Flourish, was really working. I built it up over the years. I was making regular AdSense income. My brush pack was selling consistently off the back of all of that. And at its peak, I was getting at least 10 orders a day just from people finding my videos. That's a real compounding income stream doing exactly what it's supposed to do. But this is what happened. After I had my kids, my capacity dropped significantly and suddenly. And my Fizz and Flourish channel was the thing that suffered most, because I built it in a way that demanded a lot of time and energy to maintain. The editing was heavy, the production standard that I'd set for myself was high, and it just wasn't compatible with the season of life that I'd suddenly found myself in. So I started posting less, and then less again, and then when I missed a few weeks, nothing catastrophic would happen. So I'd tell myself that it was fine because the sales were still coming in, the AdSense was still ticking over. I thought, this is it, this is what passive income looks like. It just keeps going. And for a fairly long time, it really did, which I think is actually what made the lesson so slow for me to learn, because the decline was gradual enough that I kept thinking it was fine right up until it wasn't. Over a couple of years, the sales that had been 10 a day became 5 a day, then 2 a day, then a couple every few days. But what I didn't fully understand at the time was that the channel had lost momentum. And when I did eventually start posting again a few years later, the views never really got back to where they were when I was showing up consistently. The algorithm had moved on. More importantly, the audience had moved on, and the gap I'd left was just too long for me to pick up exactly where I'd left off. And the thing I had to sit with is that I think I confused it's still earning with it's sustainable. And those are not the same thing. The channel was still earning because I'd built enough there that the momentum carried it for a while, but I hadn't been building anything new, which meant there was nothing to replace what was slowly fading. I was just coasting on the old effort without adding to it. And eventually, old effort runs out. The lesson, and this is the one I really want you to think about because I don't think this gets said enough, is that passive income is not truly set and forget it forever. The income streams that compound still need enough of your presence to keep compounding. Not constant and not in the same intensity as the building phase, but consistent enough that you're adding to what exists rather than just watching it slowly wind down. I still make sales from Fizz and Flourish today, from videos I posted years ago. That part is genuinely remarkable and I'm so grateful for it, but it's not what it was. And the reason it's not what it was is that I stopped building. And then I told myself for too long that stopping was fine because nothing had broken yet. The second time around with this channel, I built it differently. I thought much more carefully about what was sustainable for my actual life, not my ideal life. And that difference between building for the life you have and building for the life you wish you had is probably the most important thing I've learned across all of it. So what still works and why? The email sequence attached to my digital brush packs is probably the best example I have of something that genuinely runs without me. When someone buys a brush pack, they go into an automated email sequence. I set that up once and I haven't touched it in a few years. So those emails keep doing their job week after week, introducing people to what I do, building a relationship and supporting sales without me having to sit down and write something new every time I need a boost in sales. And the reason it works is because it's automated and it's attached to an evergreen product. So the brush pack doesn't expire or run out of stock, therefore the email doesn't expire. Someone can buy that pack tomorrow or 6 months from now and the same sequence kicks in and does the same job. That's what compounding looks like in practice. And it's not glamorous, but it works. If I had to point to one thing I'd encourage any creative business owner to prioritize early, it would be this. Not necessarily a brush pack specifically, but building at least one automated pathway in your business where you put the work in once and it keeps paying off over time. And what I love about this is how it connects to everything I just said about YouTube, because YouTube is what finds the person in the first place. Someone discovers a video, they buy the brush pack, and then the email sequence takes over. So even if that person never watches another video of mine, they're still in my world. And the same applies for blogs or Pinterest, wherever you're showing up on a more evergreen platform. They're still hearing from you and they have multiple opportunities to buy again without having to do anything to make that happen. For me, YouTube brings them in and the email sequence keeps them. And together, those two things work in a way that neither one of them fully could on their own. The second thing that kept working was YouTube, but I want to talk about it a bit differently here because I've already shared what happened on Fizz and Flourish. So this channel, the Creative Juice Club, is where I took those lessons from Fizz and Flourish, adopted them, and actually put them into practice. So the first thing I did differently on this new channel was get clear on the niche. Fizz and Flourish was an art channel, but it was really broad. There was studio vlogs, tutorials, business content, draw with me videos, and that meant that the audience was a real mixed bag. Some people were there for the art, some were there for the process, and some were there for the business side. And when your audience is that varied, selling anything becomes really hard because you're never quite sure who you're talking to. Whereas this channel has one clear focus, helping creatives who are building a business around a full life. And that changes everything because when I recommend a product or talk about a tool or launch something new, I know exactly who I'm speaking to. I'm not hoping that the right person is watching. I know that they are. And that focus makes every income stream work harder because the person on the other end of it is already the right fit. And this isn't just a YouTube thing. It applies wherever you're building your audience, whether that's a podcast, a newsletter, an Instagram account, a blog. The more clearly you can define who you're talking to and what you're helping them with, the more naturally everything follows. Because when someone finds your content and immediately thinks, yes, this is exactly for me, they trust you faster, they buy more readily, and they stay longer. A niche isn't a limitation. It's the thing that makes the whole business more efficient. So the next thing I did differently on this channel is that I built in searchability from the start. I researched before I filmed. I asked people what they were actually looking for rather than just what I felt like making that week. And the result was monetization of this channel in 12 uploads. Not because something went viral, but because I was making content that had a chance to keep working after I posted it. And because of that, I'm starting to build a library of videos that people are actively looking for. And some videos have done better than others. That's just the reality of any content strategy. But the ones that hit, they really hit because the audience is so aligned. And that distinction between content people scroll past and content people search for is probably the single biggest shift I made between building Fizz and Flourish and building this. Same platform, completely different approach and completely different results. The third thing that has kept working, and I think this is genuinely one of the most powerful things that a creative can build, is digital products. And I want to be honest about this in the same way that I try and be open about everything, because I think there's a lot of noise online about digital products being this miraculous passive income solution where you make one thing and then you never have to work again. And look, I wouldn't still be talking about digital products if I didn't genuinely believe in them, because I've made thousands of sales from mine over the years and they've absolutely changed the shape of my business. But they're not a one and done situation. You still need to show up and you still need to make content that leads people to them. The magic isn't the product existing, it's the product existing with a system that brings the right people to it. So the reason digital products have been such a sustainable part of my income is because once the product is made and the systems are in place, there's no fulfillment, no packaging, no shipping, no custom orders eating into my energy. Someone can buy something while I'm asleep and get it delivered straight to their inbox, or while I'm doing the school run, or in the middle of a week where I haven't posted anything. And to me, that sale is the best way to describe my version of passive income. Okay, let's get into the framework. So having watched all of this play out over several years, the things that worked and the things that didn't, I found myself thinking about how could I actually show you a way to apply these lessons to your own business. And what I kept coming back to was this really simple framework, which is essentially about effort versus return, and more specifically about whether something compounds over time or whether it expires. And I think it's worth being really honest about all four parts of this, because I've seen people, and I've been one of them myself, who avoid looking at this clearly because they're attached to something that isn't actually serving them. So number one is high effort, low return. So try and avoid this where possible. Commissions are a really good example of this for me. It's actually how I started out, and I quickly realized that as much as I wanted it to work, the reality was really difficult to sustain. Every commission was a huge amount of effort, and by the end of it, that piece of work served one person and one person only. You can't resell it, you can't repurpose it. It gets sent to that one customer and that's it. And then there's the pressure of it. Creating something to someone else's brief, the back and forth, the weight of getting it exactly right, and underneath all of that is the ceiling. You can only ever make as much money as the hours you physically put in. Like, whereas an art print, you design it once and you could sell it thousands of times. It's the same effort, but a completely different return. And that's the difference between this category and the ones higher up in the framework. So number two is high effort, high return. These are worth doing, but you want to keep them short. So this is something like your launch season or live workshops or high ticket services. The key thing to understand about this category is that it's supposed to be temporary. A launch is intense, but you want it to create customers, assets, content, and momentum that can then continue to do something useful after the launch is over. And if your high effort work is creating something that lasts, that's brilliant. That is the version of hustle that I really do believe in. But if it's not building anything and you're just back to zero again the week after, that's worth examining. So number three is low effort, low return, which is likely not worth your limited time. So this is the category where the effort is low, but so is the intention behind it. So for example, showing up somewhere just to tick a box, or posting something because you feel guilty rather than because it serves an actual purpose. Like, you can't do the minimum version of something and then wonder why it isn't working. And to be honest, almost anything can live here in this category if you're doing it half-heartedly, which means that the fix isn't always to stop doing the thing, it's to either commit to it properly or just let it go entirely. So number four, this is the category that we want to be building towards. Low effort, high return. And I just want to be clear by what I mean by that, because I'm not talking about cutting corners or throwing something half-hearted out into the world and then like hoping it makes money. I mean building something so well and so intentionally that it keeps working for you over time, so that your income becomes sustainable enough that you can keep doing the thing you actually love without burning yourself out in the process. So that's things like email automation, the evergreen digital products, the searchable content, and the systems that convert in the background without you needing to be there every single day. Not because you never want to work again, but because we want the work you put in now to keep paying off later instead of resetting to zero every single week, because that is how people burn out. So how do you actually start building these? So let me give you one concrete starting point for the low effort, high return, because it's one thing to understand why something compounds and another thing entirely to know where to actually begin. So let's start with the email sequence. The starting point is so much simpler than most people think. You do not need a complicated funnel or a huge list. You just need one product or one lead magnet to bring people in and one sequence of emails that goes out automatically after they sign up. Even 3 or 4 emails written once that introduce who you are, share something useful, and point people towards what you offer. That's it. That is the version that has been working in my business for years. Start there and then build on it. For evergreen content, whether that's YouTube, a blog, Pinterest, or any platform where content gets searched for and then discovered over time, the starting point is research before you create. Before you decide what your next piece of content is going to be, just spend 20 minutes looking at what people in your niche are actually searching for. What questions are coming up again and again? What problems are people trying to solve? Make that piece of content instead of the one you just feel like making that week. One searchable, evergreen piece of content that keeps finding new people for years is worth 10 posts that peak the day you publish them and then disappear. And for digital products, the starting point is the question you get asked the most in your DMs, your comments, by people who are a few steps behind where you are now. That question is almost always pointing towards a product worth making. It doesn't have to be a big online course. It could be a simple guide, a template, a resource pack. Just start small, validate that people want it, and build from there. I think the reason all of this matters so much, especially if you're building in limited time like I am, is that there are really only 2 types of effort in a creative business, and they can feel almost identical in the moment, but they lead to completely different places. There's effort that creates things that keep working, and there's effort that just maintains the current level of things. And I've spent more time than I'd like to admit in that second category, working really hard, constantly showing up, constantly creating, but building very little that would keep working if I stopped for the week. And it was only when I started asking myself whether the things I was building would still be working for me in a year that decisions about where to focus became much clearer. And that is what I want for you. Not necessarily my specific income streams, because that part will look different for everyone, but that feeling of building something that gives back over time rather than something that demands more and more from you just to keep things afloat. And you don't need 10 income streams to get there. You need 2 or 3 that actually compound and the patience to build them properly rather than chasing everything all at once. And if you're at that point in your business where you know you want to build something sustainable, but you want a regular moment to zoom out, refocus, and actually reconnect with the business you're building, that is what the Work in Progress Club is for. It's a monthly letter that I send out to creative business owners, a proper physical letter that lands on your doorstep every single month, filled with creative business chats, actionable prompts to help you work out what actually needs your attention, and a monthly challenge to keep you moving forward. It's the kind of thing that gives you permission to slow down for a moment and think about the bigger picture, which I think is something a lot more of us need. So the link is in the description if you want to find out more. It's open worldwide and all shipping is included. And if you want somewhere to actually plan and organize what you decide to build, the income streams, the launches, the goals, the content, all in one connected place rather than scattered across tabs and notebooks, Artova is the workspace that I built for creative business owners. There is a 7-day free trial with full access, so I'll leave the link in the description if you want to check it out. And if you want to go deeper on how Connection has actually shaped my creative business and the real lessons behind what's worked and what hasn't, go watch this video next. Just click here to watch.